Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Before the court is the people of the state of California against Dion Chambers and Ian Guthrie. This is case SCD 258303. The record will reflect that all parties and counsel are present. I see Ms. Roach present on behalf of the district attorney. Accompanying her at counsel table is Detective James Jones from the San Diego Police Department. He was the investigating officer. I see Mr. Chambers personally present. Good afternoon to you, sir. He is being represented for purposes of today's appearance by Mr. Robert Carriedo. Mr. Carriedo, thank you for specially appearing for Mr. Chambers. I will explain that the court has excused Mr. Pasiga's appearance for today's proceeding. He's back home out of state for today's proceeding, and Mr. Carriedo has graciously agreed to step in and make a special appearance for Mr. Pasiga on behalf of Mr. Chambers. I also see Mr. Guthrie present in court, along with his counsel, Ms. Von Helms, Mr. Ronas, and Mr. Wilson. Good afternoon to each of you. And of course, I neglected to say good afternoon to Ms. Roach and Detective Jones, so I will say that now. As we all know, we had two juries deciding this case. We had one jury that heard the evidence as to Mr. Chambers, and another jury heard the evidence as to Mr. Guthrie. Much of the evidence was presented to both juries at the same time because this court had ruled that most of the evidence was admissible against both of these gentlemen. There were certain items of evidence, however, that the court ruled was admissible only against one or the other of the defendants. Therefore, to avoid misuse, even unintentionally, of that information by the other jury, we used two juries in this case. The jurors who decided Mr. Chambers' case, we called, for ease, the blue jurors. I see some of those blue jurors are present. Thank you so much for your service. The jurors who were to decide Mr. Guthrie's case, we have called the red jurors. They are not in the courtroom right now, but they will be brought into the courtroom shortly to hear their verdict. The jurors who deliberated in Mr. Chambers' case, that is our so-called blue jurors, reached a verdict earlier this week. With the agreement of all counsel, the court received that verdict. The court polled each juror to make sure that that was that juror's individual decision in the case. However, in order to preserve the integrity of the deliberations of the red jurors who were hearing Mr. Guthrie's case, and for other reasons, the court did not announce the verdict in Mr. Guthrie's case at the time that it was received. I received the verdict, I polled the blue jurors, but then I ordered the verdict sealed. I found good cause to do that for a limited period of time in order to do everything that we could to ensure the integrity of the deliberations by the red jurors, and also for other reasons as well. This morning, mid-morning, we were notified that the jurors on Mr. Guthrie's case, the red jurors, had reached a verdict. We're convened today, this afternoon, to take that verdict. Our agenda this afternoon is first to take that verdict, and then secondly, I will publish, that is, read in open court, the verdict that was received in Mr. Chambers' case earlier in the week. I see that we have a full courtroom this afternoon. I see a number of family members and friends and supporters of Mr. Canady. Mr. Canady is the deceased victim in this case. At the beginning of this trial, I spoke with those families and friends and supporters of Mr. Canady and explained to them the importance of maintaining appropriate demeanor in the courtroom. No outbursts, no signaling, no expressions of emotion. And I want to thank those family members for their response to that request. There have been a number of Mr. Canady's family members and supporters present on most of the days of this trial. And with one exception, who's not here this afternoon, you folks have conducted yourself in an exemplary fashion with great dignity, notwithstanding your loss. And I want to thank you for the way you've conducted yourself throughout this trial. I know this is an emotional time. We're about to, I think, come full circle with respect to events that occurred just about exactly 2 years ago. I know how emotional this is. I'm going to ask that those who are here on behalf of Mr. Canady, in fact, those who are here on behalf of anybody, please do your best to control your emotions and outbursts as as these verdicts are being taken. But I do want to acknowledge on the record my thanks and appreciation for the way the family and supporters have conducted themselves in this case. With that, Deputy Townsend, may I ask that you bring the red jurors into the courtroom?
Yes, Your Honor.
Bob, how are you going to bring them through? Can we get by? I will ask the media to make enough of a pathway so that the jurors can come in through that door and into the jury box, please.
Okay, let's start with the back row so we know her presence. Remain seated and come to order. This court is against session.
Council and parties, please be seated. Ladies and gentlemen of the red jury, good afternoon. It's nice to see each one of you. I'd like to thank each one of you for your conscientious participation in this case and for the service that you have rendered for us. The record will reflect that all members of the red jury that was considering Mr. Guthrie's case have entered the courtroom. We also have some of the red alternates present, and I thank them as well for their service in this case. We do have media coverage. I want to reassure the jurors that we are fortunate here in San Diego that the television media are as responsible as they are. We enjoy a good working relationship with them. In talking to my colleagues around the state, that's not always the case in their jurisdictions. And the media are well aware that they are not to record or depict anybody who was a juror on this case, either the sitting jury or the prior jury. So jurors, you may feel free to not have any concerns about that. I would like to take one moment and introduce to the jurors a gentleman who is sitting here with Mr. Chambers. This is Mr. Robert Carriedo. Mr. Carriedo, thank you. Mr. Carriedo is an attorney who practices here in San Diego. With my approval, I have allowed that he can sit in for Mr. Chambers for this proceeding this afternoon in lieu of Mr. Pasiga, who has returned to his home state, but who may be back out here on future appearances depending on how things go. So Mr. Canady, thank you for your appearance on behalf of Mr. Chambers. We are addressing right now the jurors who were considering the evidence as against Mr. Guthrie. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm given to understand that you have reached verdicts. Is this correct? I see all affirmative responses. Who is the foreperson, please? Mr. Juror number 3, thank you. Mr. Juror number 3, have you completed the verdict form?
Yes, Your Honor.
Have you put in the appropriate spaces, the jury's findings that they've been asked to make?
Yes, I have.
Have you dated the form and signed it?
Yes, I have.
In your opinion, does that verdict form, as you've completed it, accurately represent the verdicts and findings of all 12 jurors?
Yes, I do.
May I ask that you hand the verdict form to the bailiff, please? Thank you. I have been handed the verdict form. I have reviewed it. It appears to be regular on its face. That is to say, I see no internal inconsistencies in the verdict form. It does bear today's date, and it bears the signature of juror number 3 as foreperson. I will now read the verdict. This is the verdict as to Mr. Guthrie. Counsel and parties may remain seated for the reading of the verdict. In the Superior Court of the State of California, in and for the County of San Diego, the people of the State of California as plaintiff, against Ian Patrick Guthrie as defendant, case number SCD 258303. Verdict as to count 1. We, the jury, in the above entitled cause, find the defendant, Ian Patrick Guthrie, guilty of the crime of murder in the first degree in violation of Penal Code Section 187, Subdivision A, as charged in count 1 of the information. It is dated May 19th, 2016, and it is signed by juror number 3 as foreperson. Addressing the jurors, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, that is the red jurors, was this and is this your verdict as I have read it?
Yes. Yes, Your Honor.
I see all affirmative responses. Addressing counsel for Mr. Guthrie, do counsel wish the jurors be polled?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to ask each one of you individually about this verdict. Ms. Juror number 1, is this your correct verdict as I have read it?
Yes, Your Honor.
Mr. Juror number 2, is this your correct verdict as I have read it?
Yes, Your Honor.
Juror number 3, is this your correct verdict as I have read it?
Yes, Your Honor.
Juror number 4, is this your correct verdict as I have read it?
Yes, Your Honor.
Juror number 5, is this your correct verdict as I have read it?
Yes, Your Honor.
Juror number 6, is this your correct verdict as I have read it?
Yes, Your Honor.
And thank you. Juror 7, is this your correct verdict as I have read it?
Yes, Your Honor.
Juror 8, is this your correct verdict as I have read it?
Yes, Your Honor.
Juror 9, is this your correct verdict as I have read it? Juror 10, is this your correct verdict as I have read it?
Yes, Your Honor.
Juror 11, is this your correct verdict as I have read it?
Yes, Your Honor.
And Juror 12, is this your correct verdict as I have read it?
It is, Your Honor.
I thank all 12 jurors. I find 12 affirmative responses to the court's polling. I am going to receive the verdict and order that it be recorded. Addressing both counsel, all counsel, do counsel waive further reading of the verdict as now recorded?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, thank you.
Yes, Your Honor.
The verdict will be deemed recorded. Where do we go from here? Well, I still have another verdict to read in open court, and that is the verdict that was reached earlier in the week as to Mr. Chambers. To inform the red jurors of this, the blue jurors who were considering Mr. Chambers' case reached a verdict earlier in the week. We had that jury in there. We went through essentially the same process that I went through with you folks, except I did not read the verdict out loud in open court. I ordered it sealed. I confirmed with each juror that the verdict duly and correctly reflected his or her vote, but then I ordered it sealed, and it has not been revealed to anybody. The only people who know what that verdict is are the 12 jurors who returned it and myself. Nobody else knows what it is. I received that verdict, but sealed it so that there would be no possibility that if one of you all were to find out what that verdict was, it might affect your deliberations. The conscientiousness that you have shown in this case makes me quite satisfied that that was probably an unnecessary measure on my part, but I did it anyway because of all the care that everyone has taken in this case to see that a fair trial be provided. So in just a few minutes, I'm going to read the verdict that I already took with respect to Mr. Chambers, but before I do that, I'd like to have just a moment to speak with the red jurors again about your service. Folks, I cannot tell you enough how important it has been that you have served on this case the way you have served on this case. This, it goes without saying, is an extremely important case for all parties involved. You have been wonderful to work with. We have prevailed upon your patience from time to time, and I apologize for having to do that. You have been conscientious and just wonderful throughout this trial. The law does not allow me to say whether I agree or disagree with your verdict, but what the law does allow me to say is that I think you did a good job, and so thank you for that. In just a moment, I'm going to formally discharge you. When you're discharged, that means that any restraints and restrictions and admonitions that you've been laboring under are now off. Specifically, you'll be free to talk to anybody about this verdict if you like. You're welcome to remain outside and talk with either counsel or the media if you want when we're finished with these proceedings. I will also tell you you don't have to talk to anybody, that you don't want to. The law says that while people are entitled to approach you to ask you, they're not entitled to do so in a way that's unwanted by you, and if you don't want to talk, then they have to abide by that. We have outstanding counsel in this case. I know that's not going to be an issue. None of these counsel are going to do anything improper. But ladies and gentlemen, if anybody tried to talk to you about the case or the verdict or your decision or why you reached it in a way that you find unwanted or unwelcome, number one, tell that person. Number two, walk away. And then number three, tell me, because I'll take care of it. I don't think it's going to be a problem, as I say, but this goes for all members of both juries, but particularly the red jury right now. The final thing I would like to do, though, is to return full circle to where we started when we first met on that first day of jury selection. And this has to do with the constitutional nature of the job that you all have done for us. And when I say us, I don't mean just us in the courtroom. I mean all of our fellow citizens, your fellow citizens, every resident of this great nation. And that is, you have provided a right to a jury trial that the Sixth Amendment guarantees. We talked about that during jury selection, didn't we, ladies and gentlemen? But let me return to that concept for just one more moment to emphasize for you all how important this task has been and why I'm so grateful to you for doing it. I'd like to read to you a quote from a United States Supreme Court case that was decided in 1993. It's called Sullivan versus Louisiana. I think when you hear the quotation, you'll say, gosh, Judge, I already knew that from our jury selection process, but I'm saying it to you so that you know this isn't just Judge Chuck Rogers talking. This is the United States Supreme Court talking about the job that you all have done. The case says this: the Sixth Amendment provides that in all criminal prosecutions, the accused shall enjoy the right to a speedy and public trial by an impartial jury. And you all have been that jury. A further reading of this verdict as now recorded.
So
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you. I want the record to reflect I am now going to discharge the blue jurors as well. Some of them are here. Those that aren't here will be receiving a telephone call from the court clerk telling them that they are discharged. The rules for the blue jurors are exactly what I presented to the red jurors just a moment ago. Folks, those of you who are present, I thank you for your service. Everything that I said to them applies with equal force to the work that you all have done. I have the same bittersweet feelings of nostalgia as I discharge you, blue jurors, as well. And I also will reiterate that I have every confidence that you performed your tasks diligently and appropriately according to the oath that you took, and I thank you for that. Just as I told the red jurors, you all are discharged. You are free to talk or not talk to anybody you like. When we recess in just a few minutes, all jurors are free to be on the road if you would like to be, or you're free to remain outside for just a few minutes. When the court received the verdict as to Mr. Chambers, but did not publish it, the court set the matter for a further proceeding and status conference on May 25th, 2016 at 9 o'clock. That is going to be next Wednesday at 9 in the morning in this department. And at that time, we have some issues to address with respect to remaining allegations, as to which there was a jury waiver. We also need to set a date for post-trial motions and sentencing. I need to order a pre-sentence report. And what I would propose, Mr. Carriedo and Ms. Roach, is to, Ms. Von Helm, Mr. Ronas, Mr. Wilson, and Mr. Chambers, Mr. Guthrie, is to set your matter on the same date and time. Is that acceptable?
That is acceptable.
All right, thank you. Mr. Chambers' case has already therefore been set for May 25th, 2016 at 9 a.m. in this department for that status conference. I will now set Mr. Guthrie's case for the same thing, and we will address any remaining issues, the ones I've mentioned and any others that anyone might have at that date and time. I am going to order that Mr. Chambers and Mr. Guthrie be held in a no bail status at this time. Inquiring of counsel for the people, is there anything else that the people believe the court should address? Mr. Carriedo, is there anything that you can think of that the court should address?
No.
And Ms. Von Helm?
No, yeah.
All right. My thanks to all counsel and parties. My particular thanks to all of our hardworking jurors in this case. What I'm going to ask Deputy Townsend is to have, in this case, the jurors exit the courtroom before any spectators exit the courtroom. You jurors who have exited the courtroom, as I say, are free to be on your way or to remain outside to talk if you wish. I would look forward and consider it a privilege to work with any one of you again the next time the computer seizes upon your name and sends you a jury summons. With luck, we'll be in the new courthouse when that happens, but you'll be able to find me, and I'll be able to find you. Folks, thank you, and the jurors are now discharged and may leave.
Mayor, remain seated until adjournment. Family members? All very quick.
Jurors and spectators have left the courtroom. Inquire